Kevin McCarthy, I want to thank you very much for joining. And what's really cool about this is I was watching you on TV 2 hours ago at the White House, and now I'm seeing you in your Capitol Hill office. How hard is it for you? I'm just curious. The minority leader, you were majority leader, you have a responsibility, have a relationship with the White House. How difficult is it to be the minority leader and also be a spokesman for a political party? So you have to be able to work with Congress, but you have your own set vision, your own ideas.
Well, I've always felt, though, as an elected official, you need to have a vision of where you want to go, but you also, in a place of Congress, you need to have a team. So it's building people together to believe in one vision, to be able to work towards it. It's fortunate that we have the administration, so we can work with it. Doesn't mean you're going to agree all the time, but you want to be able to put your vision forth. But I'm kind of excited to be able to be here. Before we begin, though, Frank, I do want to show everybody, because you don't look the same. This sits on my desk every day. There you are. You're much thinner now, and we're at almost the exact same location because you see Reagan right behind us. With your hands smiling. There we go.
I'm going to do this to you now. We got 166 people on the call. That is what I'm wearing.
It's a very good shirt.
Yes, and tell people, I used to wear that at Dodger Stadium until you told me I was fat and I couldn't wear your shirt anymore.
You know that's not true, but go ahead.
Why is the Senate back in session and the House is not?
Well, in the House, the Speaker has all the power. It's not, if you come to Capitol Hill and you go to 2 blocks away, the Starbucks, you can get a tea, you can get a latte. You walk over 100 yards and you could be in the Senate and you can see him acting. And I'm sitting in the House and there's nobody here. The Speaker will not call us back. Now, I actually put a plan together. There's about 6 of us, 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats, and we're trying to work on how do we bring Congress back. And this is an interesting topic because as you study the states, they don't open all up at once. And if Democrats are afraid to come back, why don't we do this? We could come back in a safe manner. The first thing we do is we bring committees back. And we don't bring all the committees. We bring the critical committees that have legislation that has to get done right now. Armed Services for the National Defense Authorization. Transportation to do the WRDA bill. Appropriators, right? The subcommittees. And why you only bring a few out? They can use the big rooms, have social distancing, work on that legislation. And then once that's done, you'd bring the full body back. And you wouldn't vote the same way. You would keep the votes open further. You would have people come in 8 different segments based upon the alphabet. And you'd open up the chambers. Everybody's going to come in 2 different doors and leave in 2 other doors. So you're keeping social distancing, and we can work. Now, the argument I have, Congress is essential. You know, during the Civil War, the Confederates were not that far away, and they were still meeting. If you read Winston Churchill, the latest book on Winston Churchill, they'll talk about the Parliament meeting during the day, getting bombed at night, but coming right back. If Congress is not meeting, what does that say to the rest of the public? What does that say to every doctor, delivery driver, dispatcher that's going in every day? We're essential. We should be working.
I got 2 questions on this, and they're not meant to give you a hard time because that's not what these interviews are about.
Yes.
Why are you still getting paid if you're not working because other people aren't? And second is it just an issue of fear?
You know, good question. Members will tell you they'll argue they're working from home. They're doing these phone calls and others. But in essence, if the Senate passed something, the House is not here to vote on it. We come back periodically. There's also a political, I would say, decision in this. If you're the Speaker of the House, you have a lot of power. But think about if Congress does not meet. Like right now, Speaker Pelosi is saying we need another bill. Now, she is writing the bill. She doesn't have to talk to any other member. She doesn't have to work it through committee where the American public has a voice, restores that voice if you open up. And at the end of the day, I was talking to a Democrat today. I was asking, do you know what's in the bill? No. Do you know how much it'll cost? She says it's going to be really big, at least more than $2 trillion. I said, when will you know when it's in? once she calls us all back with only the option to vote on it. So it empowers Nancy Pelosi more. It enables her to pass a bill that people don't see or know. That's a calculus that she is doing from that standpoint. But it's a very good discussion. If you're not going to work, you shouldn't be paid. That's why it's essential that we are working.
So my first question, I've disabled the chat room because, frankly, even though these are special people in this call, people can be mean. And I will tell you this from Twitter.
Don't read your Facebook messages.
No, I don't. Stopped. One of the great things about my recovery is that I don't read the comments because it'll just make you angry.
Yes.
So the first question, and this comes from Ron Kramer, is part of that legislation going to be infrastructure? Are we finally going to fix our roads, bridges, highways, 5G, all those different programs?
I think there's opportunity, but I don't believe it'll be in this legislation. One of the disappointing things, this virus, and you think about it, I was talking to the president about this just 2 hours ago, we did not invite it. We did not ask for it, but it is here. We will defeat it, but we'll defeat it only if we really work together. And I had hoped at times in history, you watch after 9/11, during World War II, people put the politics aside and came together as one nation. I haven't seen that in this virus. I've seen still politics at play. There were moments of it, and I'll give you an example, kind of a personal one people don't know. We first had done a bill about supplemental. It was big, but not that big, $8 billion. Then we came back as it was coming closer, and we did another bill. And it was kind of hard to do, whereas we were late into the night. The language was not right. And there was a question. It was a Friday night. Are we all going to go home and try to do this later? I called the speaker and I said, I'll tell you what. You and I both agree that this language is wrong and we need to change it. Let's take it to the floor, vote on it as is, and let's change this on Monday so we can show the country that we're doing something together. Now, the language was a disadvantage to me and my philosophy and my principles, but I was willing to take that risk because I thought it was too important that we got something together. And it was about testing, it was about masks and others. And on Monday, I had to fight to get the language back the way it was. It ended up turning out all right. But I thought in those moments and times, we have to put the politics aside. But in the next sequence of bills, I've watched them get stopped. And I've watched other members say, oh, you need to stop it because you'll get more leverage. We've got to stop that type of talk and really look at what does the data show? What do we need? Don't put it by blue or red state. We're one nation. I truly believe we're going to solve this problem, but we're going to solve it faster if we're working together and viewing it as one nation.
So Jesse Sharp has a question. Behind closed doors, are the relationships a little bit better than we see on television?
Oh, yeah, a lot better. What's interesting? I don't want to say on here, but because I have some very good friends on the other side who we are extremely close. There are Democrats where I will be traveling in their state, raising money to get a Republican to run and win at something, and I'll be at dinner with them and their husband or their wives. Steny Hoyer and I talk every single day. Pelosi and I have spoken more during this time than all the moments taken together and all the minutes talking that we do in the rest of our career. And I will tell you, we've had differences of opinion, but it's probably a better conversation that we have had, and they'll go on for more than an hour. And I think they've been productive. We've been honest with each other. We don't try to play games. I've been very frank with her. And then from those conversations, she'll be on a conference call and she'll literally say, well, Kevin didn't agree with this, but I respect him because this is why he told me this point. And I believe him. So from those points, yes, those have been a little better.
But she beats the hell out of you in the press conferences, and you're pretty rough on her. Is that productive?
Is it productive? I guess you'll see during the different times. I believe I can get along with anybody, but I'm not going to roll over for anybody. I need to make my point. I need to get it across. I've been working for more than a month to open Congress in a safe manner. I have worked with Democrats when we're in the middle of COVID to vote in a manner that everybody didn't have to come back. In those moments and times, yes. But I'm not going to change my principles. And the idea that we are not opening only makes what the policies going through worse. And it's not about opening a campus. It's about restoring America's voice. The idea that they wanted to change how we voted in Congress for more than 200 years to proxies. And she told me the day before. So I call her up on the phone that morning. We talked for an hour and she pulled it back. Now they're going to come back and still do it. But I spent the time, think for one moment, you lend your voice and everybody on this call to their congresswoman or congressman and for 2 years, and you hold that person accountable. Well, if it's a proxy, Nancy Pelosi could hold 200 votes in her pocket. If you read the Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, 5, 7, Congress has to meet. Our founders would be ashamed of ourselves if we did not assemble. And that's what's happening right now. And I probably have to be tough to make that come across. Yesterday, I made a point in my press conference where I went over, got a Starbucks, got a tea, and set it right there on the dais when I gave my press conference. I could get a Starbucks, I could get a latte, but I can't get legislation. That's wrong.
Could you ever imagine you and her doing a press conference together?
Yes, I actually offered that in the middle of COVID. And I also said, why don't we do a conference call with all the members of Congress, you and I together, and talk about these different things. But, I could be in a room, and this was a very tough meeting where I flew a red eye. I came back. It was when we were going to do the CARES Act. And the CARES Act was pretty much done. She comes in and she kills the bill. And inside this room, there's 4 of us meeting, McConnell, Schumer, myself. And she literally says she wants to change the election law. She's very concerned about a Green New Deal. There was nothing to do with COVID. And I looked at her and said, I'm not holding a bill up so you can pass some election on. We'll get heated, but it's passionate. And if you watch, their new bill is going to have all those things that we have stopped. And for that amount of time that sat there, people lost their jobs. And this is personal, right? People are losing their jobs. We've never seen anything like that. If we think for one moment, to have the amount of people who have died greater than the Vietnam War, and now we have more than 30 people out of work. You're combining almost the Great Depression in the middle of war, all within a 2-month time period. We've never seen anything like this. And it's not a moment in time I'm going to hold it up because I want more leverage, or I'm going to jam some more money for the Kennedy Center. That's when I get upset. That's when I'm tough on her, and I think I'm right to be.
I'm curious. This accountability commission that she wants to do, and I think you just named people to do it today. Why not do it with the Senate? Why not have the Congress? Because the Senate's controlled by the Republicans, the House by the Democrats. Why not both bodies work together and hold Washington accountable together?
You're 100% right. This is another moment in time where the Democrats did something politically. That's the only reason why it's not that way. So when we passed the CARES Act, and when you pause for one moment, you think about how much has just been appropriated in this short amount of time, $3 trillion. $3 trillion. And then the Federal Reserve is using $4 trillion. $7 trillion in about a 6-week time frame. In doing so, you're worried about transparency and accountability. So we created 3 new entities for accountability. That's beyond every committee has a subcommittee on oversight. And we have a committee that's just oversight, period. But in the CARES Act, we created, and we wanted to make it fair. So there's one oversight that is just inspectors general. They pick and they oversee. There's another one where the president nominates somebody and the Senate confirms them, and they spend 5 years looking at it. Then there's one exactly what you're talking about, where the 4 leaders, Schumer, myself, McConnell, and Pelosi, all nominate one person. And then the Speaker and McConnell decide who the 5th person, the chair, is. And they report to Congress every 30 days. None of those are political. None of those are weighted to give an advantage to one side or the other. And then the speaker comes up, Pelosi, and she names that she's going to start a new committee. Nobody from the Senate. It's weighted more to Democrats, 7, and only 5 Republicans. I told her, this just sounds like impeachment. You put Maxine Waters on. You picked Congressman Clyburn, who said when the coronavirus came forward that it was a perfect opportunity. He was on a conference call with all the Democrats. Now, this is a perfect opportunity to restructure government, in our view. And then you had another one, a sophomore, Raskin. 2 days before the inaugural, he went out to do a rally, say you got to impeach the president. He's the member of Congress that went before the Rules Committee to represent all of the Democrats to bring the impeachment articles up. And this is where I told her, I just view this as impeachment. I don't view this as oversight. If it was true oversight, let's have the same number of Republicans and the same number of Democrats and bring the Senate in as well. But I lost. I'm not the speaker.
Well, this allows me to raise another question. And this is from one of our tech people who's a supporter of no labels. What about the idea of the Problem Solvers Caucus? I know that makes Nancy Pelosi's life more difficult. It makes your life more difficult. But how well do you work with, there's now, I think, 30 people on both sides, Republicans and 30 Democrats.
I actually work very well. I go to some of their meetings. They have me come talk to them. And I try to give them a lot of good ideas on ways to make it better. Look, I believe structure dictates behavior. If you have a bad structure, you're going to get bad behavior and a bad outcome. The House is designed differently than the Senate. You know, if you think about the Senate, it's the country club, right? It's very special. It's very unique. The House is like going to a truck stop to eat. We're a microcosm of society. There's all different elements. We change every 2 years, right? We're supposed to be rambunctious. It's where the power of the idea should come forward. And I'm one who believes just because it's my idea doesn't mean it could be the best idea, but it should be challenged. And you should be able to have that voice and have that challenge. So the Problem Solvers gives you an opportunity where it gives you a chunk of Republicans and a chunk of Democrats, and they usually come from swing districts where they can really be enough to hold back either one to change a bill for the better. And when they use it right, they're effective.
So you and I have known each other almost 30 years. Won't go back to that.
And this is the thinnest I've ever seen you. So fabulous. You look great. You look younger even.
It's 50 pounds. So,
it's good.
And I want you to know that I dieted. I did not eat anything.
We're very proud.
Sorry, go ahead.
We're so very proud of you. There are a lot of people on this call who love you dearly, who've wanted you to do this for years, and we are so excited that you did.
And that's why you're mentioning truck stop food right now. So I'm going to hold that against you. So I know this. I know if I were dial testing it, if I were doing one of my focus groups, your scores would be 90 or 100. This is exactly what people want to hear on both sides. And one of the reasons why I waited to put you on, frankly, is because there are some Democrats who are giving me a hard time. Mr. Leader, you sound completely reasonable, but this is different from what you sound in the press conferences. How do you work the two? How do you unite?
Oh, I don't think I'm different in the press conference, because at the press conference, there'll be more pointed questions, right? And there's going to be contrast with this. I'll tell you, like this morning. So we did a call like this with 6 members, 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats, talking about, is there ways that we can change the rules of the House during this problem with COVID if it comes back further so Congress can still meet? And I have spent a lot of hours with it. It's McGovern where we will fight lots of times on the floor. But I have great respect for both. And as I'm sitting there talking to them, I'm saying, look, I could probably get to this point. You just have to let us concur. And they're saying, well, if we allow you to concur with, you won't bring these bills up. But I said, that's a legitimate point. So why don't we write it that I have to concur for 30 days? So you can bring up whatever you want. You still have the power. There's a way to find compromise where both people keep their principles. And the whole design of government is for compromise. That's what's difficult. people come here and believe that one side should have 100% of their way. That's not how our founders designed government. It was for compromise. That's why you had a House, a Senate. That's why you have the presidency. You're going to have to give somewhere to be able to make it work. But in society today, they punish you when you do that.
And do you think it's going to happen? Will Congress, we've only got 6 months before the election. Will the last 6 months be more functional, or is it going to be just as divided?
Only time will tell. If in writing the plan to open up Congress, it would be more functional. Because what COVID could do to Congress is stop any bill that's just a messaging or political bill. You'd prioritize, and this is what I did. I called the Majority Leader, Steny Hoyer. I said, why don't you and I call Mac Thornberry and Adam Smith, who is the chair and the ranking member of Armed Services, and why don't the four of us say to one another that nobody can offer a political amendment in the National Defense Bill. You can have differences of opinion, you can debate from nuclear weapons and others, but you're not going to put something up to talk about that's different between the two of us that got you. And if somebody does, we would all vote in unison to defeat that amendment. So when that bill comes out of committee, you will have a debate about how much to spend on missiles, how much to spend on tanks, all of that. There's a better chance of that bill actually becoming law. And it would be a very big bipartisan vote on the floor because it's on substance of what really should be done. And look, at the end of the day, if I have a fair debate and I lose the argument, but the overall bill is still good, I'm voting for it. I just want to have a fair debate.
So allow me, this is an international question.
Okay.
Because and actually, I know you care about this. This is actually the most number of people who've been on a call and the most number of people who've signed up in any of these Fridays for Frank. You are 195 and 298, so congratulations. You're number one.
All right.
Is there any hope for any climate legislation? It is a fact that the air in China is cleaner today than it has been in decades. You are from California. The air out here is cleaner than it's been in years. That we know we're putting less garbage into the air. We know that the water is cleaner. We know that the earth is healing itself. And it may surprise some people on this call that I care about this, but I do. And there's a wonderful video about the earth healing itself. And even though humans have been getting sick, the earth is getting healthier. Is there any hope for any compromise
there's a great deal
on climate issues?
There's a fabulous ability to do this, and Republicans actually have a very big plan. What's very interesting is as America becomes energy independent, we help the entire world. If you look at, I don't want to get into politics, but if you look at the climate or the Paris Accord, the only country that's been able to go down is America. Why? Because American independent, the natural gas and others. So as Europe brings in Russian natural gas, ours is about 42% cleaner than theirs. But what's unique, as we battle this COVID challenge, it affects our lungs. And we know that people are losing their lives because they can't breathe and the others. A tree is like the lungs of the earth. Okay? Because it takes in carbon dioxide and puts out oxygen. It breathes it in, it holds it. This desk that I'm on right here, more than 60% of it is the carbon. It's stored for more than 50 years ago. If we planted around this world 1 trillion trees, that would be the equivalent of taking all the carbon out that was created, or 2/3 of all the carbon that was taken from the Industrial Revolution to today. That's not government having to do anything. That's individual people that can engage. We planted the very first of 1 trillion trees at the White House just last month.
But 1 trillion trees.
That's a big number, right? That's hard to do, right? Trillion's a big number. You know what Ethiopia did last year? 350 million trees in one day. So how big is 1 trillion? It's not that big. And what we would do is, if we managed our forests better, because what you want to do, you want the trees to be able to breathe and keep more in. You want to be able to enhance people to build more with wood. Because of engineering today, Walmart is building one of their new campuses, stories high buildings of all wood. Why? Because it's storing more carbon. It's better in the process. It makes the earth cleaner. If we enhance from natural gas, nuclear is very clean. If you look at advanced nuclear, there's a great Netflix if you're stuck at home, and it's about Bill Gates. And it does, in Bill Gates' mind, it's 3 different shows. You watch the third one. Advanced nuclear is actually very small. You can run it on a city and others. This is a whole new element of where we can get to. We can achieve this, but we'll never achieve this if we have one standard for America and another for Europe and another for China. That's the problem. They're adding more coal and others. We can do clean coal. There's so much more we can do, and there's an ability for us to get there.
So you mentioned China. This is from Mark Montgomery. How would you characterize our competition with China? Are they an enemy, an adversary, or simply a competitor?
They're not just a competitor. I would say they're an adversary. And at times, when they look at different industries, they would be viewed as an enemy. Just for history itself, there's so many dark days in history where somebody has done something literally, maybe not on purpose, but made a decision that killed millions of people, and we're living through it right now. And it's more so than just being killed by the virus, the number of suicides, the mental health problem that's going to come out of this, the people who have lost their jobs. But when you sit back and you look at this, if the communist Chinese government truly believed that this came from the wet markets, they never would have opened them again. If they truly understood that they act like they did not know what it was, in Wuhan, they stopped any domestic flight that went inside China, but they allowed the international flights to go around the world. Had we kept this and contained it in China, it'd be a different story. Ebola, we were able to do that in Africa. We asked to bring our scientists in, they said no. Their deception directly led to Americans' deaths. And the challenge here is what it did to around the world. But China has a plan. By 2049, their 100th year, they want to have one superpower. The theft that they have done from our technology. They built islands and promised us that they wouldn't be weaponized. They spend and study how we fight war. So they built missiles to sink aircraft carriers and go into space. It is a real challenge for us of where we go. You know, Judy and my children, Connor and Megan, I'm not worried about them competing with anybody else's children on this phone. What I'm worried about is them competing with India and China. And are we going to be prepared for that? India wants to compete against us, and they both have large populations. They have great ability to do that. But if you compete with us on a level playing field, I believe our form of government will always win. But this isn't a level playing field. They systematically, we no longer make aspirin. We don't make penicillin. We don't make vitamins in America. Why? Because the Chinese government wants to control that supply chain. I personally know of, and I was on a call with an individual who was purchasing PPE, personal protective equipment. And what did China do when they first found out about this? They went and bought up more so they controlled it. When France sent them PPE, and then when COVID got to France, you know what China did? Sold it back to them. But an individual was purchasing millions of this from China. They had the contract, and he told me just after he got the call, we were talking, they lost that factory to build it. Why? Because Macron had called Xi and purchased some. And you know what Xi asked for Macron to sell it to him?
The French leader.
You allow Huawei into France. They're using this as leverage to control another supply chain. Were you concerned at all when our dear friend Kristi Noem, who's a governor of South Dakota, she gets this hot spot in a factory? And to be fair to her, even if she shut her state down, that factory would still be running because it's essential. But as it's making 4% of the meat for our country, who owns it? China. Are they trying to control our meat supply? If there's one thing that we should wake up about this, we should never put ourselves in this position again. From critical minerals, 70% of the ingredients that go into our pharmaceuticals, China controls. And what did China say to Australia when Australia wanted to investigate COVID-19? That they would stop selling them product. The same thing that they have tried to do to us. They use that. That's not an ally that would use something as leverage. Where people
that sounds like an enemy. And what people are asking, a lot of construction people on this call, business people, are you prepared to legislate an increase in pharmaceuticals, an increase in products, telling Walmart they're going to have to pay more, and Amazon and Costco, because we're not going to let the Chinese government control this?
You know what? It doesn't have to come down to, and I would be in a place where I would subsidize certain things that are critical minerals that you need to have here. But it's not from that case. What we have studied before, you can manufacture in America. What the communist Chinese government does is floods the market and lowers their price to put that American business out. If it takes you 8 years to build a factory here, we're holding ourselves back from being able to compete. But it goes to a whole other question. And this is what I want to do. For the last year before COVID, I went to Nancy Pelosi and to Steny Hoyer, and I asked them if we could create a committee on China. Because if you want the next century to be ours, we need a one American strategy about this, at least a strategy. And not a Republican, not a Democrat, but one. It took me about 8 months. I remember we were over for the anniversary of Normandy, D-Day, and I was with the speaker and we were working about it. I had other Democrats. They agreed to it. And we agreed to an even number of Republicans and Democrats. We were literally going to name the committee. On February 24th, when we were going to name it, they pulled back. There's a great story in the Washington Post about it this week on Wednesday, where Josh Rogan had the story written about how great this bipartisan is, and he didn't post it because we backed away. I went through with it today, or the other day, and I named a new committee, a task force on China. And I've welcomed the Democrats to join us, but they think it's political, and it's not. Think about the Harvard professor that recently got arrested from the FBI. Why? Because he was being paid $50,000 by China. Why? From Harvard University, he was one of the top to steal ideas, steal research, and identify the very best people for them to come back. That sounds like an enemy, does it not? Or our supply chain. We should at least be studying what we're doing here. The other thing we need to do is we need to modernize our stockpile. See, government comes in and buys all this stuff in fear of something happening in the future, and it just sits there. So if something happens 10 years from now, this stuff is expired. We should think differently. So the question is, can we bring people back? Let's go to the private sector. Let's take for an example. Let's say 3M. So just to be rude, let's say 3M makes 1,000 masks a year. Let's say government tells them to make 1,500 masks. We'll buy 500 of them. And then we'll go to our allies and we'll tell them, you can buy it and you store it all here. Not with government, but the private sector, right? Rule of law, they'll be able to get it. And in the next year, we asked 3M, we're going to buy new ones, but you're going to sell those old ones out into the public. So we always have renewed and fresh. And if we're allowing our allies to come back, we have now a bigger market where the private sector can do it, and government can analyze it this time. If there's some differential there, because we're buying from them, so we're creating a market, maybe we do something different to help them. Just like we should be doing in our energy industry right now, because is China going to come in and buy part of these industries that we should be concerned about? It was Saudi Arabia and Russia. It's about 25% of why the oil price dropped, but also the economy itself. That's critical to us from geopolitical and everywhere else to be energy independent.
So not only is this most people who've been on the call, and this is the most signups, but this is the most questions I've ever had. And the number one question is, how much higher are you going to put the debt? How much more spending? How much more subsidizing? That is the number one issue that I'm being asked now. Are we not going over a debt cliff?
We very well could be. We just went to $25 trillion this week. if you study history, every great society has collapsed when they overextended themselves. Now, if you study the history of the debt of America, during war, we go into debt, but right after the war, we pay ourselves back. After the Civil War, we went 28 years with a surplus. We have only wiped away our national debt for about 1 year during Andrew Jackson, 1834, 1835. There is a part of where you can manage. Now, interest rates are low, but just the movement of interest rates up could collapse us in the future. It could also take away the dollar as being the currency of the world. This is why I do not rush to do another bill. I would say we did need to act now, but we seriously have to do something. And what's really different is what's driving our debt. Before it was discretionary items that we vote on every single year. Now it's the things that are automatic, the Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on the debt, and then the part of the military. Those are the biggest items, but Medicaid, Social Security, it won't be there for the next generation if we don't do something about it. And you want to be able to guarantee that. So you've got to look at different options. Now with this interest rate so low, the Treasury had looked at now selling a 20-year bond. I believe that's smart. I would actually look at selling a 50-year, right? Because it's almost like hedging. If this interest rate just went up with how big our debt is, it would break us just there. So how can we benefit from a low interest rate, lock that in, but then restructure ourselves to pay this down? I mean, it wasn't that long ago in the 90s that they had a meeting because they were afraid they were paying their debt off too fast. I would love to have that problem again.
I was on a phone call 2 hours before. I'm sorry, I had to go away from your press conference. But I was on with over 300 mayors. And they and the governors are wondering whether Congress is going to support finance for them. I know the concern from Senator McConnell that they're going to use it not for COVID-19 and not for their economy, but to pay off pensions, to pay off unions, to pay off people that the governors have been making promises that they cannot keep. Illinois being an example.
Yeah, and Illinois' credit rating is equal to Indonesia before COVID. Okay? Jeez. And they spent, $27 million to teach people to ride a bike. So remember, this is hardworking taxpayers' money. So it doesn't matter if it comes from the federal government, it's still coming from hardworking taxpayers in America. This is what I propose, and I had a conversation about this with the president today and with Secretary Mnuchin. I personally have a problem just sending this money to governors. Because what I watch what governors will do is they'll take 25% right off the top, and the cities and counties will not. Why don't we create a grant program where the cities and counties can go directly to Treasury, show what their COVID problems are, and they can get the money directly so we know it's going. It's kind of like, do you send the money to the administrators in education or to the classroom? But there's already good news. This is what no one's talking about. In these bills we've already passed, we passed more than $500 billion for states and counties and cities in 1 month. We spend roughly $600 billion a year on Medicare for the whole year. So they've got tremendous amount of money already. There may be some flexibility problems. And as of last Friday, because we brought this problem up to the president and to Secretary Mnuchin, you should have him on. I tell you, history is going to be kind to him. What he's been able to do, the PPP program.
Mnuchin or Trump?
Mnuchin. What Mnuchin had to do during this critical time, you usually look to the Treasury Secretary. He created a new program that went to small businesses that did as many loans as a small business administration did in 14 years in 14 days. And he did it through community banks and others. But he just put out some new language. So that money we set out there, cities and counties can now grab that money if it is for police or fire, any first responders. So they don't have to say, they can grab it right now and get that. If they are worried about any first responders, we have now freed it up. So that critical part of what government means to be, they can have.
So I should know that because I'm engaged with people like you in the business community and the mayors and the governors, but I don't know that. I will tell you that the media has the lowest level of credibility than has ever been measured. I don't want you to take a Trump approach, but evaluate it from your own perspective, whether the media is telling the story as you have seen it, as you've experienced it, not just from a congressional standpoint, but also you've been participating in these White House meetings. Is the press telling the
You know, we are a microcosm of society, okay? So we have actually done some damage all of ourselves, right? We run against government because we say that's bad, and so people don't trust us. People don't trust anybody anymore. They don't trust their banks. They don't trust the media. But when I sit back this week and I look what had happened, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. If you could truly take a deep breath in and don't put yourself political, don't think about Trump, don't think about Obama, but think about if you were a family member and the FBI came to you and you learned a year or so later, they threatened to put your son in jail if you didn't plead guilty. And then you saw the notes, and in the notes the FBI said, because the FBI is the only law enforcement that doesn't take a video of your interview. You don't have that. They write notes later, right? So there's no transcripts. And in that note it said, what do you want me to make you do? To set him up to lie or something else? And you had spent 30 years in the military. There's a reason why we don't trust different people. But what went on in that nation? I'm talking about General Flynn, right? That frustrates you. Even though I am where I am, I truly believe these systems wouldn't be this way. But what I have watched for the last 3 years, I'm appalled at. I can't believe in this nation a few individuals, but those are individuals, that they have become so political that they're almost Machiavellian, that the end justifies the means. And I'm not saying that for one party. People on both sides and all sides do that. And we've got to get beyond that. We now, there is a TV show for whatever philosophical belief you have. And they're going to tell you what you want to hear. And that's a real challenge. But there's good people on both sides and the other. I get frustrated. I think I produce something, they write something else, but that's fair. So as long as I've had a fair chance, I'm okay with that. But with social media today and others, there's ability to not only have the media to get your information. That's the difference. So, and I think President Trump has found that way he could go around it.
So I just believe the political system is broken. And you and I have had this conversation before. You're an optimist. I'm a pessimist.
You are always.
I don't see how you fix it.
How you fix it? We are Americans. My God, I can't believe you even say that.
Come on, we see the fights, we see the hassles, we see the arguments, and we hear the bad comments coming from everybody.
Okay. You are saying this at this moment in time. Today is the 75th anniversary of victory in World War II in Europe. And you go out and you see those men who are 90-some years old, who were 17, who their build was smaller, who was going up with adversaries that were in a stronger position than America was. America's coming after Pearl Harbor, having to rebuild things. They were pessimistic. If you ever go to the cliffs of Normandy and you think we can't do something, the ingenuity of America, and think for one moment, this COVID is horrendous. We're going to be on Sunday, it's going to be Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to Judy, to my mom, and Sharon, my mother-in-law. But there's people who are not going to be able to be with their mothers. But think about this. We have now done 1.7 million tests in the last week. We now are sending ventilators. Normally we build 30,000 ventilators in a year. We're going to build 150,000 ventilators in 4 months. They weren't there. When Cuomo was complaining about it, he's now shipping them away, okay? So we're going to be the ventilators for the world. When we had SARS, it took us 2 years afterwards to be in a clinical 1 test for a vaccine. We are already, a couple companies are in a clinical 1 test for vaccines. The antibodies are moving. The ingenuity of America. You think it's broken. The only thing about America is we show our scars. We passionate. We show what we believe in. So maybe that's not pretty. Would you rather have it behind closed doors where China says there's no media could be in here? They lie to their people that they said, oh, we only had one person that has COVID today. No. So we're going to see everything. But from that same point that, you're going to see the bad things, and maybe it's a little slower process, but it is a much more effective, efficient process than we ever had before. Some of my biggest concerns are, though, education. If you do not have an educated society, you're not going to be there. But what are we doing with these kids of where they're going, right? And we shouldn't have the belief, if we're safe in summer, that they can't go back in summer just because people don't go to school in summer. And they come from different levels. When you talk about infrastructure, what you find in the rural communities where people are home, well, they don't have the ability for internet to be studying at home. Every house is not equal. The great thing about education is the great equalizer, right? In this country, that's the difference. You are so blessed to be in this country. If you do not believe that you can almost achieve anything, you watch day in and day out that story be told. So I know you're a pessimist at it, but maybe I always believe the cup is half full, but I'm watching it. I'm watching it every day where there is a new one. I was just tested again for the second time for COVID this week because I was seeing the president, but I got my answer in 10 minutes. You didn't have that before. And the FDA is approving things like that. We would sit back here if we were on a call 2 years ago, be mad at the FDA, right? Why aren't they faster? Everybody's going to Europe. No, everybody's going to start coming back here. This is going to wake the world up. That for those who are looking at China, for those who thought it was safe and fair, no. What is Japan doing? They're subsidizing their businesses to go out of China and come back to Japan. The rule of law and the ability of trust, the idea that we're all equal, right? The greatest challenge ever to our Constitution was the Civil War. And when I was talking to the president, and he had that town hall, and it was at the Lincoln Memorial, and that became, controversial in a way.
Yes. I
told him I thought it was right, and I don't care if he was president, whoever else was president, should do it at the Lincoln Memorial. And he said, why? I said, well, one, it's my favorite monument, but what it symbolizes, okay? Our greatest challenge was the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln, during the Civil War, of trying to keep the nation together, what did he do? He also built the Intercontinental Railway, okay? So not only was he bringing the country back together, he was also planning what the country would be like for the next 50 years. And that railway was like inventing the internet. So as we battle this virus, I believe we will overcome this, but at the same time, we should look to what does the positives that we can have come out of this. Change our supply chain, change our stockpile, re-emphasize what's important about our nation for others.
So I know that we've run long.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you and beg you for 5 more minutes.
Please. I'm fine. I was going to fly home tonight, but I can't because I'm doing this. So yeah, I'm good. I'm staying.
You know that causes my brain to go crazy. So tell people you're kidding.
I'm not kidding. Ask Judy. I stayed just for you.
No, I cannot be responsible. You got to get home for Mother's Day. I'm sure Judy's on.
I'll just fly early in the morning tomorrow. The puppies.
Okay. Another question I got to go to that I'm being screamed at. You're talking to Mnuchin every day. You're talking to Larry Kudlow, President's Economic Advisor. You talk to Trump every day. The economy looks horrific.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the White House is trying to paint a more positive picture because the election is only 6 months away. I don't see it. I'm looking at unemployment. I'm looking at shortages. Even our food supply chain is challenged. A lot of these businesses are not opening up, even though George has said, hey, everyone can go out now. A lot of businesses did not open. What are they telling you about the economy? And you can be candid with us. Okay. The election's not now.
Okay, since we have more time, let me walk you through the whole thing. So when COVID's coming in, we have a challenge here to really not know how strong it's going to be, but to work some legislation where people are going to go home and others. And our whole thought here was, if government is telling you you have to shut down to fight this, we also have a responsibility. So you want to get money into the economy because right before COVID, we had the strongest economy we ever had. I mean, these numbers were at 3% growth. Everybody was loving it. People were working wherever they are. So the economic crisis was not created because of a bank scandal or anything else. So we first sent checks to individuals, right? So they have cash. We changed the unemployment insurance that normally you have to wait a week. No, we take care of the first week. The federal government, even how they wrote it, I don't think this is right. But what they did, they added $600 on top of whatever the state pays. So there's an element of industries where people are making more money on unemployment, and then they have less incentives to come back, and we extended that longer. Then we went out.
Hold on. That makes no sense. Why should people be paid not to work?
Well, unemployment insurance, because the country is not equal in every place, right? If you're living down where you live or you live in Bakersfield, it's a different pay. But because in the nature of where we were crafting this, and you couldn't get it just right, so you had to do a flat rate. So we did an extra $600 because you want these people to be able to pay their rent or pay their mortgages so it doesn't slide down into a financial crisis within banking. Small business that employs more people than large business, we assumed that this was going to be like a 2-month time frame. So we stood up something totally new. You're not going to go to government. You're going to go to your local banks. We're going to let credit unions, fintech, community banks loan. And we put in $350 billion. It made it a 2-page application where you simply gave 2.5 times of expenses. If you took 75% of that and you paid your employees, it became a grant, not a loan. Your rent, your utilities, right? So how could we keep the small businesses afloat till we get back in, hoping it's some type of V? That was so popular, we had to come back and put in more money. That's where politics came in and got held up, and that became a problem. To the larger business, over 500, we would give you a tax credit where we could pay for half of your employee, and we'd do loans to you. But there are people who would sit back and say, I fought for a long time. I think this is longer than 2 months. You and I would say differently now, though, our behaviors are all going to change. Are we going to go to a live concert again? Are we going to hug? I know you're a big hugger. And then shake hands and others. I'll tell that private story later.
Yes, remember, the word private is private.
How could you tell that stuff?
But listen, but Kevin.
So what we're doing,
Marcus declared bankruptcy.
So now we have 30 million
bankruptcy.
We have 30 million people unemployed. But there was one statistic inside there that was interesting, and only time will tell. Will this be a V or will this be a W? Will COVID, as it's coming down, will it come back as the Spanish flu later when it gets winter or fall again? These are all things you don't know, but we have to prepare for. 2/3, about 18 million people who are on the uninsured, said they believe they're going back to work in the next short time period. You never really had that number, so that's optimistic and that's good. And you could have a situation where you're beginning to have growth, and in the fourth quarter or the next year could be some of our strongest growth ever. The only reason why you think that could happen is because we came into this because of a virus, not because of anything economics. But how will the virus change our lives? Will you get on an airplane again? I've been getting on an airplane each week. I feel they're cleaner than they've ever been. Will our behavior be different? I was talking to an individual yesterday, and he's on the board of a department store. And this department, it's a pretty good department store. And it's probably a mid-level one, great name. I won't say it because I don't know if they want these public. In the states that have opened up, it was Texas and Arkansas. Their sales were 60% of what they were 1 year ago. But there was some interesting data inside it. For the A-class shopping center they were in, the malls, their sales were down. For the B-class shopping centers, their sales was up. They even had one store that was 110% that it was a year ago. Now, I could extrapolate from that. Maybe an A is a higher class area and they don't need things, and maybe somebody at lower income needs to go in there and buy the clothes or something. But that was very promising. So as states open up, and think, Frank, if you study how did this COVID get spread in America? New York. Last week, if you looked at the data, unfortunately, 55% of all of our deaths came from New York and New Jersey. America's different. You can open up in different places. And it spread via New York. But if you look at the recent data this week of people who are getting COVID now, only 17% of those people were working. 66% of them, they were home, they were retired, and only 3% rode mass transit. So that's the reverse of what we thought before. We thought mass transit spreads this. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. We thought you had to stop working. Maybe as we learn new data every day that we tell people if you are 65 or older, you should stay home until we get an antibody or a vaccine. If you were younger and as testing, think about it, 1.7 million people tested in the last week. We were over 8.5 million people tested. And every day that improves. Today there was 300,000 people tested. But you're going to have the tracking. Because as we open, there can be a hot spot. But it's how we treat it so it doesn't get spread.
But you know that it's people on your side of the aisle that does not want government to have that information. And it's on the other side of the aisle that doesn't want business to make money off of developing the system. How do we get a tracking system? This is from Bernie Moreno. How do we get a tracking system? And you've got Fox and MSNBC already trying to take it down.
Well, as Barr says, the virus did not kill the Constitution. So you got to build one in the framework of the Constitution, and you can do that. Then you have HIPAA laws on top of it and everything else. I'll give you one example. Whoop. What is it? WHOOP.com. They're a wearable, right? Like a Fitbit. You should get one of these, right? It's really good. Like it's different too. I think you pay like $30 a month. They give you the wearable. What they have found, because a lot of people wear them. They start just with professional athletes, but they measure everything, your sleep and all that. They had found that about 1,000 people who wore it got COVID. But they were able to tell you had it before you had any symptoms. So say you have a workforce, small workforce, you're worried about somebody coming in. You could have everybody that has a Whoop, they get it, ooh, I'm not going into work that day, so I'm not giving it to somebody else. Because the other stuff that we found later that China didn't tell us, people could have no symptoms and have it and then passing it around. There is a site, is it Citizen? It has 1 million people in New York. Already on it, right? And you can go back and you reset, but they can trace you of where you are. So they can find you, especially with Bluetooth, if you're 10 feet away somebody or not. And if that person gets it, they partnered where they'll send you a kit. This is a new thing that's happening too. You can have a self-kit to test yourself and in 24 hours have the answer. But when you sign up for it, they'll tell them the answer the same time you know the answer, and then they'll advise people you don't even know if you've been around them in a restaurant, others saying, you need to be tested. There are ways to do this that keeps our liberty and at the same time utilizes technology. And with our Constitution, that's what we're going to have to do. But tracing is really important as we move forward.
So I got one more question, and it's a personal one. Okay. And I'm going to end by saying, so he's the Republican leader of the House, and I don't want to get your donors in an uproar. But when I got sick in January, now I'm looking at you and now at the camera. The guy called me every day to make sure I was still alive. Every day, every week, for a month, to make sure that I didn't give up. I don't know how to find a friend better than that. He reached out and tried to get people to get my act together. And he, I want those who gave me a hard time, as Kevin, a few of them did, putting you on this call, to listen to what you've said. And more importantly, to hear what you've said. Because that effort, reach across the aisle, and that effort to reach out to a friend is, I'm forever grateful. What advice? You're kind and you're optimistic. What advice would you give to those who are listening now that they can make the most of these weeks and months, to people who are afraid as I was, so they will have the outlook that you have?
Look, I called you every day. Judy did too. We even called your staff when you're trying to fire them, kicking them out of the hospitals, trying to leave. It's because we care about you. And Because human beings care about one another. And I went down to LA the other day just so I could walk with you. And just so everybody knows, Frank walked in the street and I walked on the sidewalk. Social distancing we had the whole time. And you asked me this, why can I still be happy and excited? I thought there were two reasons why I told you when I thought about it. I think it's my personality and it's my faith, right? And the one thing I sit back and I watch a lot of people, and sometimes politics divide people. I lost friends who had always been my friend, even though I was a Republican and even though I was a congressman, but Trump got elected. Didn't change me, didn't change, but I think we have to think more about what unites us as an American, right? In my office, I keep portraits, some that you have as well. And there's one that I keep inside my conference room. And it's big. It's 8 feet by 16 feet. And it's Washington crossing the Delaware, right? And there's a reason why I keep it there. And a lot of people don't know the story behind it, right? They all know that happened Christmas 1776. But there's no iPhone. There's no camera. The person who painted the painting wasn't a part of that day. He actually didn't paint the painting until 1850, 1851. His name was Emanuel Luntz. And he was a German. He was actually an immigrant who lived in America but moved back home. And he took with him, when he moved back to Germany, the values of who we were. And he wanted to take that and inspire Germany to have a revolution based upon the things that America had that he thought was great. And so he heard of this story. So he gets it historically incorrect. He puts Washington in a rowboat with 13 people, but you only see 12 faces. Washington, ceremonial, hand on the chest. You look at him and think he'd never lost a battle. He'd never won, right? That was our first victory, we surprised the Hessians. But when you Google and look at this picture, look who's in it. You know, the second guy is Scottish.
I'm going to show, as you describe it,
yeah,
I'm going to show the painting.
Sure, because you have one. Mine's better. Go higher. Okay, what you're seeing, go a little further. Go a little further. Go a little further. Well, he's cutting it off. You see Washington stand there. But in front of that, the second person rowing is Scottish. The person directly across from the African-American. You see right there in the middle there, that's a woman rowing. And go all the way to the back. The very last person is Native American. But you see that next to last person, he has a hand across his face like this. That's the hand of the 13th person nobody sees. And what this young immigrant who lived in America was believing. Here we are, not even a nation, but an idea. Having never won a battle before, but willing to risk everything on what people would say are holiest of night for the idea of freedom. Here's a hand. Would you get in and join us? If we had that idea right now, that people were just getting in the boat, that we're going to cross waters and face something we haven't faced before, like this virus, that maybe in the first 2 months we did not win it, but we will overcome it. On a day of a 75th anniversary that we overcame the tyranny of Hitler and others when we were not as strong as we are today. And then when you sit and you look at the backdrop of Lincoln, remember what Lincoln said. Conceived in liberty and dedicated the proposition that we're all equal. There's been no other nation like it. So if you get upset that maybe the government is not working perfect, that's okay, because it is still the best form. The power rests with all of us. We will be able to get through this. But the uniqueness of this country, when we solve this and get a vaccine, we will not think, let's just keep it in America. We will not tell France that for us to give you the vaccine, that you're going to have to only take American technology. We won't do any of the things that others who want to be the world power. It's because who we are as human beings and the form of how we set up our government itself. That's what gets me excited every single day to come to work. I just hope they open the house back up.
Well, so do we all. I cannot thank you enough. You went over an hour. I'm going to right now disconnect everyone. I'm calling your wife to apologize profusely.
Oh, she doesn't care.
You in Washington.
I had to be here. I'm coming back tomorrow morning. Judy says our marriage stays the strongest when I have to go to D.C. a couple times a week.
Say that again.
Judy says our marriage stays the strongest when I spend a couple days a week in D.C.
Well, yeah, that's because I go visit her while you're here.
That's right.
Everybody, thank you very much for joining. We're going to do this another couple weeks. A very special guest coming up, Kevin McCarthy. You are a great government servant. You are a great American, and you're an awesome friend.
All right,
So
Frank.
thank you, everybody.
You look great.
Thanks.